In the days when the cost of air travel was prohibitively expensive for the average American family, summer vacations for most of us usually involved loading up the family car and hitting the road. The places we stayed were pretty basic and the attractions we visited were far from cutting edge, but there was something special about those trips that seems to have been lost in the days of inexpensive flights, massive theme parks, and family-oriented cruise ships. If you remember the feeling of adventure that set in when your hometown radio station began to fade out, then join me for a trip back in time to the days when seatbelts were optional, air conditioning was an open car window, and getting there was half the fun. Join me for an authentic look back to see what family vacations were like when cars were huge, gas was cheap, and road trips ruled. In 1970, a round-trip flight to Florida for a family of 4 would have cost the equivalent of almost $5,000 in today's money. Therefore, most family travel was done in the family car, with potential destinations limited only by how far we could get within the amount of time Dad had off from work. Instead of massive themed resorts with indoor water parks, we spent 8 hours in the back seat to swim in parking lot pools and be entertained by stationary fiberglass dinosaurs. Families today pay extra for adventure experiences that come pre-packaged with a safety harness and a helmet. But in the days before cell phones and GPS, the adventure started as soon as you left your driveway. If you're like me and you cherish old family memories, I bet you'd be fascinated by all the lost family history you could uncover with the help of today's sponsor, MyHeritage. I've been using MyHeritage for 3 years, so it's really cool to have them partnering with me on this video. MyHeritage is the world's #1 family research site, and right now, they're offering you a 14-day free trial when you scan this QR code or click my link in the description. Let me show you what it can do. Just put in a few names, and the Smart Match feature will begin identifying and matching up your relatives. Then, using instant discoveries, you can add entire branches to your family tree with just a click. Within half an hour of logging into MyHeritage, I traced a branch of my family back 10 generations and discovered that my first American ancestors arrived from England just 12 years after the Mayflower. I never knew I had relatives who fought in the Civil War. I now know of several. MyHeritage had draft registrations, photos, and quite possibly the same newspaper article in which my great-great-great-grandparents would have learned about the death of their son Job. With over 90 million users and more than 36 billion historical records, you'll find things on MyHeritage you won't find anywhere else, including old photos you've never seen, uploaded by family members you've never met. Here's a picture they had of my great-grandfather Halvor from Norway. MyHeritage also has an easy-to-use photo enhancement tool that can repair, colorize, and even animate your photos with a few simple clicks. Here are my great-great-grandparents Mons and Ann, brought to life by the MyHeritage Live Memory feature. To grab your 14-day free trial of MyHeritage and start uncovering your lost family history, just scan this QR code or click my link in the description of this video. You may be amazed by what you find. I know I was. The origins of the American road trip trace back to the 1920s, when the mass production of automobiles, especially the Ford Model T, made car ownership accessible to the middle class. As these new automobile owners began driving their cars longer distances, small towns and enterprising landowners began developing automobile camps and tourist courts to meet the demand. The real boom, of course, came after World War II, when the combination of higher incomes, paid vacations, the baby boom, along with better cars and an improved highway system transformed regional vacation travel from a challenge into a leisure activity. Over the next 20 years, the family road trip would become an American tradition, and an entire industry of roadside motels, diners, attractions, and regional tourist towns would develop in response. Long car trips in the 1960s and 70s were a completely different experience, especially for kids. Instead of being strapped into booster seats in a modern SUV, we were sitting on the bench back seats of oversized sedans and station wagons, unbuckled and free to move around. Without smartphones and video screens, the only entertainment was the car radio, and when you lost the signal from your local stations, it seemed like all you could pick up were country stations on the AM dial. So when you were bored of the alphabet game and the invisible ink in your yes and no pens had run dry, there was nothing left to do but to annoy your nearest sibling with the inevitable game of I'm not touching you. But you'd be wise to take heed of the warning glance from Mom. With nothing to do but sit there on your butt for the next several hours, the last thing you wanted was for Dad to make good on his threat of, "Don't make me pull this car over." Eventually, that thermos of coffee your mom brought from home would be down to its last drop of Maxwell House, so it'd be time for a pit stop. But you weren't headed to a Starbucks drive-thru. Back in the 1960s and 70s, the best coffee came out of a round glass coffee pot, poured steaming hot by a uniformed waitress into a ceramic coffee mug sitting between the napkin dispenser and an ashtray on the counter of a truck stop cafe. In fact, that's still where the best coffee comes from, although the truck stop cafes are disappearing almost as fast as the ashtrays. While Mom and Dad downed more coffee, you'd sip your orange drink and get started connecting the dots on the back of your kiddie menu. Whether it was food, gas, bathroom breaks, or just the need to get out and stretch your legs, the family road trip was anything but a non-stop excursion. In my family, it was my dad who wanted to stop and read all of the historic markers, while my mom couldn't pass up the scenic overlooks. And for us kids, we were suckers for any type of colossal fiberglass animal or character, of which there were plenty. For me, as a kid growing up in Minnesota, you can chart my age progression in pictures in front of Paul Bunyan, Smokey the Bear, and any number of giant fiberglass fish. And it wasn't just the giant cowboys and Paul Bunyan that had your family pulling off the road. Sometimes, all it took was driving past a series of FOMO-inducing billboards to have you going well out of your way to see some irresistible something or other. And if you've ever been heading west to see Mount Rushmore and somehow found yourself miles off I-90 in the middle of Mitchell, South Dakota, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Fortunately, no matter where in the country you lived, there was always a place within a day or two's drive that, at least in some way, was more interesting than the place you were coming from. Many of these locations developed around already existing natural features or historic sites. The western half of the country had mountains, historic Old West towns, and beautiful national parks like Yosemite, Yellowstone, and the Grand Canyon. The eastern part of the country had mountain retreats like the Borscht Belt resorts of the Catskill Mountains and the honeymoon resorts of the Poconos. There was Niagara Falls, New York's Lake George, and any number of beach towns up and down the coast from Cape Cod to Florida. Further south, towns like Cherokee, North Carolina, and Gatlinburg, Tennessee, grew into tourist destinations following the establishment of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in 1934. Even in the middle of the country, there were some natural wonders to attract travelers, including Missouri's Lake of the Ozarks, Arkansas's Hot Springs, Mark Twain's hometown of Hannibal, Missouri, and my family's go-to spot, the Wisconsin Dells. Kids today drive go-karts on top of cruise ships and go on high-tech rides with massive lifelike dinosaurs. The attractions in the 1970s were a little less exciting. We had the mystery spot. Perhaps you remember visiting that geologic anomaly where the laws of gravity had gone berserk, and you could take pictures like this. We also had Deer Park and Deer Farm and Deer Ranch and several other places where you could feed and pet tame deer. We had big slides and countless mini golf courses. And growing up in the 1970s, I always thought Wisconsin Dells was the only place that had amphibious duck boat tours. Nope. They also had duck boats in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and even Branson, Missouri. We also had enchanted forests, prehistoric lands with more fiberglass dinosaurs, various water ski shows, and of course, Old West theme parks. There was Six Gun Territory in Florida, Frontier City in Michigan, Frontier Town in New York, Maryland, and Oklahoma, Fort of the Osage at Lake of the Ozarks, and a unique park called Ghost Town in the Sky that sat on top of Buck Mountain in North Carolina. Wisconsin Dells had Fort Dells. Inside the stockade walls of Fort Dells, you could take a paddle wheeler cruise on the River of Adventure, drive old-fashioned cars, get a ride on the Dells Fargo stagecoach, and tour the park aboard the Kilbourne and Western Railroad. Kids were deputized and issued badges to help in the hunt for the bank robber Black Bart. The pursuit would always end with a shootout between Black Bart and the marshal, after which Black Bart would be tossed into jail by the marshal with help from all the little deputies. By the late 1970s, the cowboy theme had faded in popularity, and most of the Western-themed parks went out of business, including Fort Dells, which shut its gates for the last time in 1985. But you can still catch a ride on the train, which is now in service again at a new attraction just down the road. Just like Disneyland featured a nostalgic Main Street USA, tourist towns had their own Main Street USA, except the shops and the nostalgia were authentic. Well, as authentic as any Main Street made up mainly of restaurants, gift shops, and candy stores could be. Back then, the shops were independently owned, and you could usually find the friendly proprietor right there behind the counter. In addition to the gift shops and candy shops, while walking the Main Street sidewalks, you might also find haunted houses, old-time photo parlors, wax museums, and those old shooting galleries where you drop in a quarter and fire your rifle at light-sensitive targets to launch tin cans into the air, start the cuckoo clock, or get the man sitting at the piano to play a tune. While some of the old tourist towns are still around, sadly, much of their nostalgic charm has been lost. Many of the independent gift shops are now gone, replaced by a string of indistinguishable t-shirt shops, each trying to outdo the next with the most offensive shirts they dare display. Families today stay at brand-name hotels with indoor pools and indoor hallways. In the 1960s and 70s, we stayed in canvas tents that leaked in the rain, tourist motels, and rickety old cabins with questionable plumbing and a fly swatter hanging by the door. But honestly, we couldn't have been happier. Tourist motels had swimming pools and sometimes outdoor games like shuffleboard or horseshoes. Campgrounds usually had game rooms with pool or ping pong tables and maybe some early arcade games. Sometimes there would be outdoor movie nights or an evening hayride. We stayed at a family-owned resort called Anchor Bay, and while you couldn't really call it a hayride, every morning Grandpa Need would drive the kids around the grounds in a homemade wooden trailer attached to one of those old-fashioned two-wheel lawn tractors. As far as I was concerned, that was as good as any amusement park ride anywhere. While today's cruise ships and mega resorts offer non-stop activities and endless entertainment options, our vintage road trip vacations gave us something even more valuable: time spent together. Because of the fact there wasn't always something exciting to do, it left us more time to hang out with each other and do stuff we didn't do at home. Things like swimming, fishing, playing shuffleboard, or even just playing cards with each other. In 2025, flights are cheap and families today commonly travel to locations throughout the US and beyond. Vacation options include massive theme park resorts, luxury vacation rentals, and family-friendly cruise ships. And while families, of course, still travel in their cars, the type of adventure we experienced in the 1960s and 70s is no longer a part of it. With electronic navigation and controlled access freeways, there's little reason to stop other than to use the restroom or eat, which usually means a fast food place right off the freeway exit. And inside the car, kids aren't entertained by their smart devices, videos, and video games rather than the family road trip games we played years ago. But those of us who grew up in the earlier times remember how adventurous those old road trips used to be. Inside the car was just you and your family with no connection to the outside world other than the radio. Stuck together for the next week or more, you headed out over fields and hills, across bridges and rivers, and through tiny towns you'd never seen before and may never see again. Over the next several days, you would sleep under a different roof, eat different foods, eventually returning home with a sunburn you might have for a week and memories you'd have for a lifetime. And remember, don't pass up the chance to finally discover your family's history. Use your phone's camera to scan the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description below to grab your 14-day free trial of MyHeritage. If you enjoyed this video, I bet you'll like this next one as well. Just click to watch.